Alright guys, such a again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. The CDL Champ schedule has been officially confirmed by the league for the first time, confirming which matches are going to happen in which order at the first day of the World Championship on this bracket that we've all been waiting for. Many are trying to figure out this OpTic versus FaZe match that will be last on the opening day of the tournament. How is that going to go given the history between OpTic and FaZe on Treyarch games and also on this title individually? Could Drazah do it again? Will Shotzzy finally get his revenge on this FaZe team during the Treyarch era? Very much interested to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. A couple of things to get into. First of all, we're talking about the rookies so far this season. We're pretty sure, let's be real, that Renkor's going to get Rookie of the Year. Super, I think, made it kind of interesting towards the end of the season. He at least made such an impact in Search and Destroy, and frankly, the team, even with Renkor at the start of the season, yeah, they did great in Madrid, but after that wasn't quite the same, right? Super, once he came in, really consolidated them as the team that they are today. And his search has been great, but I think the most recent major, Renkor probably showed that, yeah, he's the real difference maker on the team overall and the more impactful player, I would say. And of course, he was there longer as well, so gets more of a nod in that sense. The other rookies, Exnid wasn't like all that far away. We had some other rookies, though, unfortunately, as well. Lunarz had a really difficult year, and Dylan Rex, he came in briefly to the Ravens. Look, Vivid told us on the couch back at DreamHack Dallas that as far as he was concerned, that Ravens team was basically chalked anyway before he left. Like, Vivid felt like someone was going to have to go. It eventually was him, as it usually is, unfortunately, for Vivid in those circumstances. And the team hasn't really seemed to fix all that much since then. Rex has, to be fair, had enough promising maps that I don't think his career is just shot if, you know, let's say Ravens bomb out of Champs top 8 and Rex gets dropped. I don't think that's necessarily it for him in the league. Lunarz, on the other hand, because he's had the whole season at Gorillas and it's been a bit of a shambles, but then hasn't really had as many maps that are as promising. That's more challenging for him, right? But, you know, given Mercules at least has made it pretty promising towards the end of the season on the OpTic side, there is some optimism that, yeah, there is still some challengers talent down there. It's just, you know, guys like Rex have been around for several years, gets his chance, hasn't really worked out so far, but at least he gets the chance to play at Champs and potentially the World Cup after that. Thought it was pretty interesting as well to look back on some of the numbers from back in the day. So these were the top KDs in Modern Warfare 2019, and as you might expect, basically all of them were AR players. That's how that game was designed. To be fair, the MP5 with the 10mm, whatever it was, the bullets you could put on it, was insanely good. And we had sometimes 4 of them on a map. But the way that the game played, the time to kill, the differences it had from BO4 and kind of like that pseudo jetpack era really meant that for SMGs, it was a far more challenging game to do well on. Simp was kind of by far in terms of statistics the best SMG of the season with a 1.15. Simp would have been the MVP of the year if it hadn't been for Shotzzy massively turning up at the end of the season and Dallas Empire. To be fair, they didn't even, you know, he was given the MVP Shotzzy before they won Champs, I think, because it was a regular season MVP. But at the end of the season, you know, him and Dallas turned up big time. Simp arguably could have got it. There was some debate on it at the time. But it is just interesting to look back on some of these numbers because, you know, this would surprise, if you've come into the league over the last 2 years, you'd be like, wow, this is, okay, Octane 1.24, no real surprises there, but Skyz a 1.23. Of course, the last couple of seasons have been far more challenging for him, but, you know, back in the day, he was on Florida at the time. They were having a really good time, Skyz was, especially Waskin played for the Ravens back then. They came top 4 at the World Championship that year. There was a weird World Championship that season in terms of format, first of all, but also they had, it was over 2 weekends. They played one weekend of matches and then the final weekend was just the championship weekends where only 4 teams made it. Ravens were one of those teams. But again, Waskin was known for being a rather slow AR. Like very slow AR, like in Search and Destroy with the sniper on Arcloth Peak. I'm sure many of you guys remember that story, or just the story of that kind of season in general. Now, Awakening, he came in halfway through the season and did really well. He was pretty quick, actually, at the time. He used an SMG and an AR, kind of like Mack, actually. And Mack's not too far further down the list either, right? It's a really impressive season from those guys, given they were effectively the flex players at the time. One of the other big surprises will probably be GodRx, because GodRx that year for the Minnesota Rocker was actually really strong. Again, he had a reputation for playing for kills, let's say, by the pros, and what's remarkable is that GodRx never got an opportunity again in the league, even after this good season statistically. He didn't come back in Cold War, Vanguard, MW2, before finally getting a chance again last year, and, well, we know how that ended, of course, on the Ravens. Assault, Mack, FeLo, all at a 1.12. What a player FeLo was. I mean, not even just that season, but the previous seasons as well. And then Den's, Australian player, of course, AR for the team. He was on Paris at the time, rounded out with a 1.10. So I thought that was an interesting trip down memory lane. But lots of these guys, especially, let's say, Clayster, who was not on that list at the time, but of course won the World Championship the year, so won't be too bad about it. They have been away, some of the Falcons guys, after Major 4, not making it to Champs, taking a bit of a break. Clay says he's back from his trip, and, well, just in time maybe for the run towards the World Championship, or at least maybe to help some of these teams get some practice in, because we know that Falcons, those guys, you know, were away. So people wondering, okay, are they going to come back? Teams maybe get some scrims in, because these guys are also going to be trying to prepare for the World Cup as well out there in Riyadh. But this is going to happen before then. So only 8 teams made it to the World Championship. Rocco were not one of them. Cloud9 were not one of them. Falcons and Los Angeles Guerrillas, of course, gentlemates, the other 2 that didn't make it. And this is going to be the schedule for the first day of the tournament. And, you know, maybe not too many surprises here. The fact that we've got FaZe versus OpTic happening as the last game of the day. But there were a couple of interesting things about this. The first thing to note about this graphic is it doesn't tell you what day. And I think that's the confusing thing. First of all, it doesn't even say Thursday, right? Because this is going to be a Thursday set of games, actually coming up precisely 2 weeks today. But the graphic says day 1 schedule, COD Championship weekends, and it tells you the times. 3 Eastern is when everything's going to be kicking off. Surge, Heretics, Thieves, Boston, Toronto Ravens, and then FaZe, OpTic to close out the day, which I'm pretty sure simply goes in order of the bracket in terms of which winners' games are in order of, you know, basically just top to bottom. But obviously, as we know, there's always more to it than that, right? They would always love to have OpTic and FaZe. That's the big game of the day. Sometimes they will put that like third, because then the argument is that people would tune in a little bit earlier to watch that and then might stay around for the final series. But the other logic is to say, well, you just put the big game last. And, you know, OpTic always have to deal with this as a roster. It's always been a thing. They will always play 3rd or 4th on these opening days. And, you know, that's okay, whatever. They have to deal with it, and they have to deal with the consequences of that. Some players might not prefer it. They might prefer a game slightly earlier in the day, but it is what it is. That's when they're going to play final game against FaZe after everything else has unfolded ahead of them. And they will also know, if they were to win, who their second round game is going to be. Would be either Toronto or Ravens. There's obviously a heavy favourite in that series as well. But I think the key talking point for many fans was like, well, you know, why don't we get to see the day that this is unfolding? As I say, this is the bracket for the tournament. Surge, Heretics, Thieves, Boston, Ultra, Ravens, FaZe, OpTic. So effectively that is simply going in order. But the following day, you know, if OpTic play again, we'll see how that goes. But as a result, you know, we saw tweets like this coming out. Wait, Champs is this week? The game is so dead, I was tuned out of the scene. Or the game is so terrible, I was tuned out of the scene. And people are like, actually, no, sorry, it's not this week. The fact that they put this graphic out with no date makes it kind of seem like it is this week. And I wouldn't blame people for feeling that way. A couple of other critiques as well of this happening, because these are all best of 5 matches. And there was some debate as to whether this could be best of 7s, right? Now, we know the World Championship Grand Final is a best of 9, and that's been the way now for a good couple of years. Best of 7s is how it is nowadays in a regular season major, but all the regular matches are still best of 5. And there is talk that for Champs, maybe you should bump those numbers up. The reality is, best of 7s take a lot longer than best of 5s, the way that it is. And we have done it before, like back in the day, the Stage 1, Stage 2 playoffs in Black Ops 3, they were single elimination, but best of 7s. And that's maybe a reasonable format, but people didn't really like it. People tend to prefer double elimination, best of 5s. And this tournament, look, there's only 8 teams here, but it's still a very long bracket to get from 8 teams down to 1, especially because the World Championship Sunday is literally just the grand final. So making it best of 7s would make the game days just so long. Look, would you at the end of the tournament give yourself a better chance of getting the best team 1? Probably, sure, but I don't have an issue really keeping it best of 5s personally. But of course, people have been talking about Drazah versus OpTic, OpTic versus FaZe. What does that match potentially look like again? Even I thought a remarkable Brian stat here, he says, OpTic Texas will match up against FaZe at COD Champs for the first time in the CDL era. Kind of crazy to think about. OpTic have never played FaZe at Champs. This is the first time it's going to happen. They played FaZe at Champs, but before the CDL. The last time OpTic and FaZe matched up at Champs was 2017, where the Dynasty took down Zuma, Attach Gunless, and Enable en route to the World Championship that year. So pretty insane, right? OpTic versus FaZe has been like the matchup. And, okay, it's not always been OpTic in the CDL era. MW19 was Dallas Empire, right? Which kind of became OpTic. But, you know what I'm saying? Technically, with OpTic Texas over the last couple of years, they've not played one another. They did play, so, you know, Huntsman, right, played them, but of course wasn't exactly OpTic. And Dashy never competed against Simp aBeZy at Champs, which is not true, actually. They did play in Black Ops 4, so 6 years ago. But it's been 6 years since Dashy has played the Tiny Terrors at the World Championship, and OpTic have never played FaZe, at least as OpTic Texas, over the last few years in the CDL. So pretty crazy that this is going to be the first time, and by the numbers in the Treyarch domain, you know, it's not been a great one for Shotzzy, right, or just for OpTic in general. In Treyarch titles, obviously Shotzzy's only played a couple. Cold War, where FaZe were dominant, especially against Dallas Empire, where they just had their number. And then the most recent game, where FaZe have once again dominated OpTic. You know, it's not been great in Treyarch games, right? So this is the chance for OpTic to kind of get their revenge on all of that difficult times this season, at times last season too. Obviously, we know that OpTic had FaZe's number for a time, but since Drazah's joined, that seems to have turned around, the CEO and all this. And even Dashy was joking about that on stream the other day. This is the opportune moment to make it happen, right? OpTic could catch FaZe. And look, if OpTic were to win that series, the amount of confidence they would have to go through the rest of the tournament. Obviously, look, 7th seed in the regular year, that put them as playing the 2nd seed in FaZe, rather than they could have been in Ravens spots playing Toronto round 1. But maybe this is better in some respects. Yeah, they're not going to be favourites, but if they win it, that will give them so much momentum. The final thing to mention before we close the video really is just the fact that the dates, the times, why is this happening now, when is this happening, and why is the season structured in this way? There's lots of fans at the moment, including myself, who are saying, damn, that major in DreamHack Dallas feels like, you know, good couple of weeks ago now, because it was, and we've still got a couple of weeks to go until the World Championship. Why is there nothing between now and then? How it used to be back in the CWL, the regular season would finish, we would then do the season playoffs, and 2 weeks after that was Champs. So you would never get like this month break where nobody's like, oh, well, I guess COD's done for the year, because it kind of feels like COD's done for the year, and then we have 2 more big tournaments, but they feel so disconnected that you could literally, if you wanted to, have fit another major in the cycle between like DreamHack Dallas and Major and the World Championship. It could have been done, potentially. But it's just the way that they've decided to do things means that, I mean, how are they intending to maintain so much interest and hype going into Champs when they have nothing happening, right? As I say, in the CWL, there used to be the playoffs, which would be like a couple of weeks after the end of the season, and then Champs would be like 2 weeks after that. So, you know, this weekend would be a big tournament, and then a couple of weeks' time would be obviously the biggest tournament. This season, that's not how it's been done. I think that this was what was happening at the start of the season, the talk around Major 4, when that was going to be, DreamHack Dallas, which this was the OpTic schedule for the season, the game dates where they played. And obviously Pred's here on the graphic because he was on the team at the start of the season. That relatively swiftly changed, then changed back again, and then changed again. But this was OpTic's kind of season schedule from the start of the year, looking forward to June, and of course they did eventually qualify for the World Championship at the end of June as well. But I think because of when DreamHack Dallas was, it kind of forced the hand of the league in some respects to push and basically condense Major 3, Major 4, which means we have this current predicament where none of the fans, I don't imagine really many of the players are particularly happy with how, you know, the schedule has currently outlined itself this season. And then after Champs, about 3-4 weeks after that, we've then got the World Cup. So after Champs, we've got another big break, and I'm hoping there's at least some roster mania in that period to keep us entertained. But very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.